Title of tonight's presentation is The Road Yet Taken, Disrupting Aging Through Travel. So again, we appreciate you all attending for tonight. And we want to let you know that this event is free to the community and is made possible by Keiro, along with support from the Aratani Foundation. A few housekeeping items as we get started. If you do have any questions throughout the presentation or would like to communicate with our team or our speaker for tonight, please utilize the Q&A function that you'll see at the bottom or the top of your screen or the chat box as well. So please, again, we do want to engage with our audience. So if you have any questions as Roxana presents tonight, we do want to make sure we collect those questions for the end during the Q&A portion. Before we do get into tonight's presentation, I want to share a little bit about Keiro as an organization. We are a mission-driven organization engaged in improving the quality of life of older adults and their caregivers in the Japanese American community of Los Angeles, Orange, and Ventura counties. Our mission at Keiro is to enhance the quality of senior life in our community. As we find the needs of older adults and caregivers to be changing, how we deliver on our mission has also evolved. Currently, we are providing programs like tonight's speaker series event, alongside other resources, including conferences, events, and educational seminars. Among the services that we provide include our Iyashi Care program. It is a flagship program we have in partnership with Providence, and we want our community to learn more about this free consultation program. This is a community consultation program where palliative care is provided as a resource to members of our community, including older adults and their families. And we encourage you to learn more about this program on our website or by contacting our staff with the phone number that's listed on this slide, or by emailing us at programs@keiro.org. Following tonight's presentation, I encourage you to visit our website and to learn more about this program so we can see how we can support you within the community. At this time, I do want to introduce tonight's speaker, Roxana Tsukamoto Lewis. Again, the topic of today is The Road Yet Taken, Disrupting Aging Through Travel. And I do want to remind people, if you do have questions throughout the presentation, please utilize that Q&A feature as we get underway. To introduce Roxana, Roxana Tsukamoto Lewis is a certified travel advisor specializing in Italy, Japan, culinary travel, and adventures around the world, including mountain climbing and marathons. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Roxana Tsukamoto Lewis, our speaker for tonight.
Good evening, all. Thank you for joining me tonight as I share my story of disrupting aging through travel. In case you haven't guessed, I'm an authority on aging. Why? It's confession time. I'm 76 years old. And no, it's not died yet. So it's your turn. Help me to understand who you are and where we are chronologically on our life paths. So if I can have the Keiro team launch poll number 1 for me. All right, I'll give you just a minute to indicate in what demographic you fall, and then we'll tally the results and have an idea of where everybody is. Ta-dum, ta-dum, ta-dum. Okay, so hopefully everybody's had a chance to respond. And okay, it's whoopee time. So it looks like the 66 to 80-year-old category, of which I am a part, is the predominant age category. Okay, well, I'm feeling much more comfortable now because I'm amongst my fellow travelers. All right, well, let me start with a little bit of background about me. I'm a native Angelino. I was born in East LA, and thanks to my dad, I'm a proud second-generation Californian. I did the normal things growing up. I had a brace on my teeth, and at 11, I was it was discovered that I was nearsighted, and I've worn glasses ever since. I was a Brownie and then a Girl Scout, and spent many happy summers hiking in the Angeles National Forest. I went to Berkeley in the 1960s and spent my energy marching with Mario Savio against the war in Vietnam. At this time, I inherited $1,000 from my grandfather, which bought me a boat ticket to Japan. The boat is another long story. I dropped out of Cal and went to seek my roots in a country as foreign in language and culture as Botswana. This was my first foreign travel. During the next 2 years, I learned the language and gained a deep and abiding appreciation for the country and its people. And along the way, I learned a lot about myself. This was transformational travel at its best. I returned home and said to my parents, okay, time to go back to Cal and finish the 28 units to graduate. To which my no-nonsense Nisei mom said, that's nice, get a job. So with my Japanese language skill, I did just that. I hired on with a regional carrier called Western Airlines. It was my first paycheck in a long career. If I could have the second visual launched, the year was 1968. I did a couple of stints with different airlines. A portion of the time with the MITRE Corporation, where you needed a secret clearance to go to the ladies' room. I transitioned to the travel agency business and started my own agency, where after 30 years, I merged with the large global collection where I am today, 51 years later. Which brings me to my 8 tips for successful aging. Tip number 1, do something you enjoy every day. When you immerse yourself in things you enjoy, you can't wait to do them again. And then you do them again and again, and the enjoyment continues. I run every day. Actually, I have 2 things I enjoy. I love my work. So I guess I've got 2 of the tip number 1. Tip number 2, and this is probably the most relevant and important of the 8 tips. Value your body. Without health, everything else is secondary. And this brings me to another very interesting part about my past. During the early years of my career, when I was working hard, setting up my business, I confess I smoked 3 packs a day, and my definition of exercise was walking to the refrigerator. I called myself normal. Fortunately, a good friend had returned from a trekking trip to Nepal and said, Roxana, you should go to Nepal, it's fabulous. The good news is I had given up my smoking habit. The bad news is I had gained 25 pounds. So I thought, well, this is a great way for me to lose some weight. So I signed up for a soft adventure 4-day escapade hiking around the Annapurna area. Soft adventure is defined as a Sherpa who carries your Samsonite luggage from one camp to another while you go skipping off with your day pack and your water bottle and your camera to poke in and out of enchanting Nepalese villages and to interact with the adorable Nepalese children. Well, needless to say, I was entranced. So I came back and vowed that I would get into tip-top shape and go back and trek to Namche Bazaar. Namche is the jumping off point for climbs of Mount Everest. Well, I never made it to Namche, but along that journey, I managed to climb a lot of big, big mountains. Mount Rainier, the Matterhorn, Mont Blanc, lots of mountains and volcanoes in Mexico and Ecuador, and the high point of Peru, Huascaran at 20,000 feet. So yes, travel does transform. Number 3, learn. Exercise your brain continually. Fortunately, in my profession, I learn something new every day. The world changes and I have to keep up with it. Number 4, each morning, find 3 things for which you are grateful. It's a nice way to start the day. So on my morning run, one of my 3 gratitudes is my health. Number 5, work at friendships. Friendships are fuel, providing energy, love, and feeding your emotions. You're never too old for new friendships. And I always thank those friends that got me my transformative trips. Number 6, okay, this is a big one. Embrace change. Life is change. Living for it can create adventures you've never thought possible. I create change by finding something every year that is outside my comfort zone, and then I work at making it happen. So here's another one of my my discomfort tips. When I started marathoning, my discomfort was a challenge to run a marathon in all 50 states. I've now completed the 50 states 4 times. So the comfort zones get tougher and tougher. So somewhere along the way, I ran a 100-miler. So Keiro, can I have you, I've got this really wonderful clip which will hopefully inspire all of us. It's a 81-year-old gentleman, Kinoshita-san, who's is going to show us what stepping out of your comfort zone is all about.
最初はね、足の置き方がわからんかったんですよ。よー転げましたわ。死ぬ以外はかすり傷じゃいけん。そのような気持ち。今日は上手な人がいっぱいいてあるからね。怖い。
初めて1ヶ月ぐらいの時に目がここがバーコンって青タンできてやって、すごい熱心にやってんねんなと思って、木下さんが頑張ってるから僕らも頑張ろうっていう気になりますよね。
あの子5歳やけどね、完全に負けた。先生ですわ。
うん、しっかり。
あんなできへんのよ。みんなと友達になれることと、それ技が一つずつできたら それがごっつい楽しいことになります。はい、充実してますね。
Wasn't that inspiring? I picked that because my Rainier climbing buddy, who is tuned in from Seattle, John, is 81 years old as well. So, John, go out and get a skateboard. Okay, so on to tip number 7. Share happiness. Make it a point to spread joy whenever possible. It feels good to make someone else feel good, and it's very inexpensive to do so. Tip number 8, last one, pay it forward. Take that kindness given and pay it forward whenever you can. Another inspirational story, perhaps some of you caught, is about Captain Tom. Keiro team, if you could run this little video clip. So Captain Tom is 99 years old.
Approaching his 100th birthday, 100 laps of his garden during lockdown, all of the money going to NHS charities, a guard of honour from the 1st Battalion, the Yorkshire Regiment. Inches to go, and there he is. Congratulations. Well done. Absolutely amazing, amazing achievement. Captain Tom, how do you feel this morning?
Fine. I mean, yes. I mean, I'm surrounded by the right sort of people, so yes, I feel fine. I hope you're all feeling fine too.
Well, we are feeling much more fine. I think we've all been inspired. The whole country, it seems like the whole world has been inspired by your achievement.
Oh, thank you.
Really great to see you this morning.
Yes.
Isn't that something to clap about? So 99-year-old Captain Tom Morris raised $33 million for the National Health Service during COVID last year. That's about paying it forward. Okay, so here we are. I am going into the segment of traveling and all of our aspirations, and so I bring up this next visual, which is to fill your life with adventures, not things. Have stories to tell, not stuff to show. So I'm going to launch poll 2 and see where all of us are as far as our travel expectations, our travel agenda. So if you quickly answer how often you do travel, infrequently, once a year, or several times a year. And then hit the submit, and we'll have the team run a quick tally and see where everybody's travel pattern is. How are we doing there, team?
Give it 5 more seconds.
Okay, thank you. Had to think about that one, huh? Okay, now this is interesting. See, I would have guessed 2, but I travel infrequently, but would like to make it a regular habit. Okay, so half of you do not travel frequently, but really aspire to do so. Okay, well, here we go. So the next visual is, it's time to start planning your New Year travel resolutions. And here's the mantra. There are 7 days in a week, and someday is not one of them. So I'm going to share with you some of my favorite travel choices to help you perhaps get to maybe the once a year level. Okay, so my tip number one for a smart travel choice is to find the right travel advisor. The travel advisor is like a financial planner. It's an investment in your future planning and the navigator who will steer you to the right choices and the guardian who will watch your back. I know this sounds self-serving because I'm a travel advisor, but if I was on the other side of the desk, I would look high and low to find somebody whose personality matches mine, whose temperament and scope will augment my needs. And then I would stick with that person for life, for my travel life. I have clients that I've had for almost the 50 years that I've been doing travel. And I'm like a GP. I know better than they do sometimes where they should go and what they should do. If you're looking for a good source, check out www.thetravelinstitute.com. The Institute is the largest certifier of travel advisors in the country. So you can always find one that's good. And, I leave you with self-research. The difficulty today is you can Google Italian vacation and end up with about 7 million options. It's so overwhelming. You need somebody to guide you down the right path. Number two, have credit cards with rewards. 80% of mileage rewards are now earned not by flying, but by purchasing. Current credit card bonus signups for many cards can get you to Japan. Another trick is to renew every 2 years when an attractive bonus is offered. So for example, my Chase Sapphire currently has an $80,000 bonus sign up. For 80,000 points, you can get to Japan. Number three, global entry. For a small investment of $20 a year, $100, you can skip security lines. You can not have to take off your shoes or your belt or your jacket, and you can speed through check-in and also security global immigration clearance on your return. So doing some math, if you fly 2 times per year, you go and visit your cousin in Eugene or your daughter in Boston, that breaks down to basically $10 per trip and is definitely something that's well worthwhile. Also, don't forget Real ID. In California, Real ID will become mandatory it's been extended to May of 2023. And you will need Real ID to get onto any plane. So if you do not have that little bear in the upper right-hand corner of your driver's license, you need to get cracking, because with COVID, the DMV and also passport issuance are all backlogged. So getting any kind of ID is taking months, not weeks. Number four, always register on airline websites. Although you may feel it an unnecessary inconvenience, by providing contact information and documentary data, the airline now has a way to contact you for check-in details, for flight changes, for weather issues, and for international COVID requirements if you're flying internationally. And I even get last-minute gate changes. So I could be at LAX and get a text from American that says your gate has changed from where I'm at, 52 to 62. It's something that really it should be done. Number five, register for hotel, rental car, or travel supplier websites, again, wherever possible. This is like airline registration. It's a way for hotels to offer you free Wi-Fi, touchless check-in, to let you know what the current COVID requirements are, what restaurants in the hotels are open or not open. And likewise for rental car companies, it's even more important because if you do register and give the rental car company your driver's license and credit card, you'll get expedited check-in. You won't even have to stand in the mile-long lines to pick up your rental car. That's a real big issue today. So I really strongly encourage that. And then all of these registrations are complimentary. So who can beat free? So those are my 5 top travel choices to perhaps propel you to start planning. So I was asked to give some advice on what I thought was next as far as travel trends. So if I could have the next visual brought up. So here are 4 things, oops, back, thank you. Here are 4 things that I think are really going to become, will be in the forefront for travel through all of 2022 for sure. Number 1, travelers are going to have to be vaccinated. If you're an anti-vaxxer, you're not going to be able to travel. And now boosters are actually mandatory in a lot of places. So to give you an idea, a vast percentage of Americans are now traveling to Europe. Asia still is not open for in most cases. But I was just in Italy 3 weeks ago, and the EU, Europe is really serious about vaccinations and proof of. And there is something called a green pass. And anybody who gets on public transportation must be vaccinated, must wear a mask, and must prove that they are vaccinated. So I was on a bus in La Spezia, and 2 investigators got on the bus, and they made everybody prove that they were vaccinated. So Europe is taking vaccination seriously on public transportation. The other bullet points, travelers will need to budget for COVID testing procedures. So at this point, it's necessary to test negatively for COVID to come home. So if you're going abroad, 24 hours before your return, you have to test negative in order to re-enter the US. In many countries, you have to test negative to get on a plane to go. So for my trip to Italy, I had 48 hours prior to test negative before I could even travel. So COVID testing is here to stay. Now, the budget part is that you do need to take into account that there is a cost factor in most cases. And many times, depending on how or where you are, it can be quite costly. So I do know stories of $200 COVID tests. Domestically, it's not quite an issue. I think Hawaii has now lifted the need to test negative to enter Hawaii. All travelers will need to be smartphone savvy, as QR codes and email access to certifications are here to stay. So if you're only a mild smartphone user, I don't want to plug Apple, smartphone user, you need to become proficient. So if you're one of those seniors who says, oh, I don't need to have iPhone or smartphone access because I walk into Einstein's to get my bagels. You now really should be smartphone savvy because all of the certifications, QR codes for entry almost anywhere have to be on your smartphone. And lastly, travel slow, travel small, and travel quiet. So in light of the coronavirus and COVID, travel has changed dramatically in the last 2 years. The super bus trips with 52 passengers have really become a threat. And so it's necessary to travel small, to think small. the past Tuesday, it must be Belgium scenario is gone, at least until this pandemic is over. And it's the smart traveler who goes with the smaller ship, the smaller group, and travels in lesser numbers. And my recommendation is to always seek nature. First of all, it's outdoors, so you have at least a double safety net there, and you can enjoy the quiet of what nature has to offer. And so now you can bring up the last visual. And if you'll allow me, I'd like to share with you the first paragraph from a fellow Californian, John Steinbeck's Travels with Charlie. When I was very young and the urge to be someplace else was on me, I was assured by mature people that maturity would cure this itch. When years described me as mature, the remedy prescribed was middle age. In middle age, I was assured that greater age will calm my fever. And now that I'm 58 or 76, perhaps senility will do the job. Nothing has worked, nothing. 4 horse blasts of a ship's whistle will still raise the hair on my neck and set my feet to tapping. The sound of a jet, an engine warming up, even the clopping of shod hooves on pavement brings on the ancient shudder, the dry mouth, the vacant eye, the hot palms, and the churn of stomach high up under the rib cage. In other words, I don't improve. In further words, once a bum, always a bum. I fear the disease is incurable. Thank you all for being here. I wish you joy and a fair wind at your back when you travel. Thank you. And now, I guess we're open for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Roxana. And I think we do have quite a few questions coming in from our audience. So our team is putting them together. In addition to your tips for successful aging, I think the smart travel choices are definitely some takeaways that our audience can have. You did mention and allude to, the pandemic is still going on. We do have some questions that came in specifically related to COVID. So the first one is, when do you think, as in your role as a certified travel advisor, when do you think it will be safe to travel with COVID? Is it something we will always have to contend with?
Good question. So I spent 2020, so basically President Trump closed our borders on March 22nd. And I was scheduled to leave for Japan on March 25. So I didn't go. And I didn't travel at all for all of 2020, which for me was very unusual. But as soon as I did actually think about getting on a plane, but my conscience got the better of me. But as soon as I was vaccinated twice, naturally, and then 14 days later, legally able to get on a plane, I took out my A list and looked at the countries that were open for vaccinated Americans and got on a plane and went to the Galapagos. That was March of 2021. So last year, I made 6 international trips. This is all during COVID. And there were ups and downs, but each of the countries that I visited, Iceland, Canada, Belgium, Italy last month, whatever. Anyway, I did 6 international trips, and every time, if you take precautions, I tested negative going and coming. So but I traveled outside of crowds. I stayed out of crowded restaurants and crowded museums. Well, many of the museums weren't open, but if you take normal precautions as far as the spreading of the virus, I think it's absolutely totally safe to travel now. Now, to be totally honest, there is the inconvenience of all the testing that's required. So you do have to deal with that sort of wrinkle. And then lots of travelers are finding it uncomfortable because although you may be asymptomatic, you could test positive, which would then quarantine you. So I do know somebody whose friend is in Madrid quarantined because she can't come home until she tests negative. So, you know, there are those little bumps in the road. And some people can deal with the uncertainty of it, and many people just prefer to sit tight or travel domestically. So domestic travel is going gangbusters.
Great, thank you so much for the insight. I think we did have a couple of questions related to the testing that you may have to go, like, I guess, undertake when you are traveling overseas. Are you able to use kind of the at-home tests? Can you bring them yourselves? Do they have to be administered? That was one of the questions that came in.
You can do at-home tests, and I do know many people who use them very successfully. I've not found that I have a need for them. Right now in Europe, for example, because you only need an antigen test to come back. I tested in Bologna to come home and had my certification in 11 minutes in a local pharmacy for 15 euros. So, you know, I mean, the at-home tests are, I think, $50. And here again, it depends on your comfort zone as far as using your smartphone, because you do have to, you know, be proficient in doing that.
Thank you. And I think we have a couple more questions related to testing and the testing sites. So I think you alluded to, if you do test overseas, you do have to quarantine. Is it difficult to find those testing sites in order to make your return trip home?
No, they're everywhere. Yeah. And basically, if you have a travel supplier who's handling your arrangements, they will tell you where you can test, what it costs, what the hours are, and maybe even make the arrangements and reservations.
Great, thank you so much. And I know you did mention domestic travel as an alternative if you are wary or just hesitant to travel internationally. Do you have any other recommendations for our audience today if they do have interest in traveling, but they may have reservations due to COVID or the pandemic?
Ooh, most certainly. So last year, along with my 6 international trips, I made 9 domestic trips, all to run marathons in different states. So it actually is very easy. There are lots of states where the anti-vaxxers are in large numbers. Florida and Texas are kind of infamous for that. So, you know, it sort of depends on where you want to go, but there's certainly lots of safe states that you can go to.
Got it. Thank you so much. And again, if you do have any other questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. I think our team is fielding and adding the questions to our question bank for right now. One person through registration did ask, do you have any suggestions for someone who may be traveling with maybe themselves or with someone else who's wheelchair bound? Any recommendations, or do you have any kind of thoughts on that type of travel?
Oh, goodness. That's a real challenge. There actually is it's sort of a collective or a company that does handicapped, or I'm not sure if handicap is politically appropriate to use, but for travelers who have some sort of disability. So it depends on the level of disability, but certainly it can be done. I personally arranged a trip to London for a 91-year-old grandmother from Hawaii who went with her daughter-in-law and her two granddaughters, and she has a light collapsible wheelchair that she took with her, and of course she had her granddaughters to help push her all over London. So it can be done, and I think anybody who has the desire will find a way, and I encourage it.
Great, thank you so much. Another question we did get through the registration was, is it safe for individuals to travel alone? Do you have any recommendations? I guess if that is the case and people are considering traveling by themselves?
That's a good question because I'm a solo traveler. And I always have thought that solo travel for women is probably one of the most expansive experiences. Sometimes it's scary and it's tough when you get started, but in the end, it's really, it can be life-changing. There's a wonderful website or a blog called Solo Women Travel. I think it's on Facebook, and I would strongly recommend it. I read it every day, and there are always inspirational stories of women traveling alone. But when I reached 65, my goal was to take my Medicare savings, which was considerable because I was paying over $10,000 a year for health insurance. And I did my first round the world solo. So, it's something that can really make you a bigger person. What can I say? But it's scary. It can be scary.
That makes a lot of sense. If people are feeling maybe hesitant or they're on the fence about it, any words of encouragement or any additional thoughts?
Well, my first round the world, I kept simple. I just did 3 countries, a week per country. And so, I wasn't hopping all over the place. And I connected in each place with some sort of local resource, a tour guide or a culinary expert, or you could do homestays so that you're with somebody local who can help you out with maybe tips for whatever. So to gain a contact locally makes you feel like you're not totally alone. But if you can't find a traveling companion, don't wait. Because I started out the same way. I would ask 50 people, well, 5 people that I knew to start running marathons with me in the 50 states, and they'd all go, oh, okay, but I don't have this time, or I don't have the money, or I did. So, it's the same thing as waiting for somebody to show up in the morning for my morning run. I have to get out there and do it on my own. And so somebody who wants to go solo should start by going solo, get in your car and drive someplace that you've not been. The car is at least familiar, and then figure out what to do, whether it's El Paso or Mammoth or you name it, someplace new.
Great, thank you so much for the follow-up. We do have a few more questions coming in for internationally related travel. You mentioned the global entry. I think that's related to the TSA kind of pre-check process, but for global kind of travel. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about that? Where do you get it? What is it? And how does it benefit your travel experience?
Okay, so global entry, yes, is for international travel, but by virtue of having global entry, you automatically get TSA pre-check. So the difference between global entry and trusted traveler is that Trusted Traveler does not get you international access. So, and I think there's only a $20 difference. I think Trusted Traveler is $80 a year, $80 per sign up, which is, I think, a 5-year window, the same as Global Entry. And Global Entry is $100. The difference is that for Global Entry, you have to interview with immigration, you have to be fingerprinted, and so the process right now is a little bit tenuous because of staffing due to COVID. So I'm not sure if they're even granting Global Entry right now. That could be an issue. I hadn't checked because my Global Entry is expires in 2 weeks on my birthday. So they've extended it because there's no staffing for another 2 years. And the same thing with DMV too. I think they're extending driver's licenses as well. But the advantage is that you're pre-checked, you're pre-cleared, and so when you re-enter the U.S., now for LAX is facial ID, facial identification. So I used to have to take my passport out, slide it in a scanner, put my hand down and fingerprint proof. But now all I do is stand in front of the camera and authorization spits out. I don't even have to show my passport. So I can be off a plane and at curbside at LAX in 11 minutes. I don't check a bag. So it's really a godsend. It really is something that you have to do if you travel internationally.
Great, thank you so much. One person did ask if you have any trips to Japan that they can join. They're interested in visiting Kyushu at some point.
Well, yes, I actually have 4 trips. The first one I don't think is going to go, but it's a series of Japan in 4 seasons, starting in the summer, this summer, fall of 2022, winter of 2023, spring of 2023. And they're all going to be unique trips. They're going to be only limited to 12 people, and I will personally be escorting them. If there is any, and the winter one is to Kyushu. But if there's anybody interested, they're certainly welcome to get in touch with me.
Great, thank you so much. I think a couple quick questions related to your travel advisor kind of role or your experience. What are your thoughts currently on booking a cruise or even thinking about or considering booking a cruise, specifically with COVID concerns or kind of those thoughts in mind?
Okay. The CDC just issued a really devastating indictment against cruising. So it's a valid question. Again, my edict to travel small holds. So don't pick the mega ships with 4,375 passengers. Pick a small ship. That's number one. There are many, many small cruise lines, hopefully going where you want to go. So the smaller the demographic, the better. And then all of the cruise lines are making tremendous, tremendous efforts to be COVID safe. And many of them are not at capacity. So even a 125 passenger vessel may only be booking at 75 or 80% capacity. And the larger ships actually only at half, if at any. Yeah. So I think that cruising is just as safe, but here again, it's the same old thing. You're still going to have to wear a mask. You're going to have to wear a mask everywhere on the ship. So a lot of my clients are saying, I don't, why would I go on vacation and have to wear a mask? Well, you have to wear a mask to go into Trader Joe's. So get a life.
Thank you for the insight. And then another question we have, maybe kind of leaning on your travel kind of just background and your travel advisor experience, is it best to have reservations rather than to just try to find a place where you end up at nighttime, kind of planning it in advance in that way?
Oh, again, this is a temperament issue. So if you're a by the seat of the pants kind of traveler, then I say go for it. But most people don't feel comfortable. And the only reason I do is I've been doing it for 50 years, so I've had a lot of practice. But I just did Iceland for almost 2 weeks without reservation. So, and I did Vietnam that way. Hopefully my Vietnam travel buddy is here. But, you know, we would just show up and go look for a hotel and found some fabulous places for $35 or whatever. But it leaves you flexible. It leaves you able to create a sense of adventure and to be a traveler, not a tourist. So, but you know, again, it takes a whole lot of practice.
Very interesting. I think that distinction between being a traveler versus being a tourist, I think that's an interesting takeaway to take from this conversation. Let's see. I think we do have time for maybe a few more questions. So again, maybe one of your travel tips was to always register on the airline website, but maybe separate from that, do you have any recommendations on how to find the best deals when traveling? Maybe the best deals aren't necessarily coming from the airline websites themselves, but how would you advise the audience in this regard?
Here again, it's a matter of shopping around. So the more you dig, the more options you may come up with. The problem is, or the challenge is, that travel pricing changes daily. And so you can be checking something today, the price could change tomorrow, and then it can change again the next day. So it depends on your energy level and how much you want to dig. I actually don't have the patience. So if I see a good price, I just issued a ticket round trip LA to Cairo for $762 for for February. So you know that could happen. February. That's in 2 weeks. But here again, you know, the average price for a ticket to Italy could be $1,100. So, you know, you sort of get a feel, and then you ask yourself, well, you know, if this is within my budget, then I just need to buy it and move on, and, you know, quit suffering about, is the price going to go down $100 or $200, and just get with the program. So, yeah, you know, it just depends on personalities, but it's a shopper's market, and it changes so rapidly. It's a tough road to call.
Got it. Thank you so much. I think we do have time for a couple more questions. So one is, do you have any recommendations on the best international airlines? Maybe if price isn't necessarily a consideration, just best in terms of quality, or what you prefer?
Well, the Middle Eastern airlines are really coming into the forefront. So Emirates, Etihad, and Qatar are really now shining. But in Asia, where we can't go, Cathay Pacific and Japan Airlines and Thai Airlines really rate at the top of the spectrum. I would say that American aviation used to be the pinnacle of airline performance, and now all of our legacy carriers are really viewed as second rate. Service and levels of performance really are below other carriers. But you know, I say it's like a bus ticket. As long as it'll get me there safely, The seat is the seat is the seat. So I just buy by price. But yeah, there are people who discriminate.
Understood. Got it. Thank you so much. And then I think maybe the last question I'll take for right now, we do have a lot of other questions. So I think I'll have a personal follow-up question for after this last question. But someone did ask, in your opinion, when is the best time to travel? If there's like a season to travel or maybe time of the year, what are your thoughts to that question?
Well, in light of COVID, the best time is off season because there's the least amount of people. So depending on where you're going, I mean, if it's South America, it's the opposite of our season. So our summer is their winter. Same thing with Australia and New Zealand. Their winter is our summer and vice versa. So right now they're in the middle of summer. I would always advocate to travel off season wherever you're going. It's just less crowded. And actually, there's something called shoulders, which is just at the beginning of the off season and the end of the off season, when prices normally go down 10 or 15%. But I say normally because COVID has really changed the whole landscape. But you can probably save yourself some money. So, for example, for Europe, the off season is November 1st to April 15, and the shoulder is April 16 to June 1. So if you travel in that early springtime period, your weather is ideal, even given global warming, and the prices are slightly down as opposed to high season or peak season, and then you don't have the crowds. So, but the issue is right now you don't have any crowds, period. So if you can, travel. It's wonderful.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Roxana. Thank you for being so gracious with your time, for answering all the questions. In response to one of the questions you mentioned, if someone did want to travel to Japan, they can contact you. I think we do have some outstanding questions or maybe some hanging questions from our audience we didn't get a chance to get to. Would it be okay if we shared either your contact information or had people get connected with you in some way?
Absolutely. No problem.
Great. Well,
they have to make a donation to Keiro, though.
this was unprompted. So again, Roxana, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. I do have some closing remarks as far as just kind of closing slides I do want to wrap up with, but maybe afterwards we'd be happy to share your contact information. If you can maybe type it out into the chat and we can share that in the post kind of presentation, evaluation and email we'll be sending.
Okay, super.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Again, like I said, I'll just be reviewing just the closing slides we have. We are excited to announce that we do have an upcoming caregiver conference. It'll be in March of 2022. Our format is a little bit different for this specific way we will be presenting the caregiver conference. We are doing it in a series format rather than a one-day format. And then we have topics including understanding long-term care costs, navigating challenging conversations, and stress management for caregivers. So be on the lookout. Our registration does open at the top of next week, which will be Monday, January 17th. I do want to also mention that along with registration, you are able to opt into this complimentary care package that we will be putting together. So we'll have limited quantities, but we do encourage you do sign up once registration opens next week. Speaker series. So tonight's speaker series event was the first for this year. We do have an upcoming series scheduled for May of just in a few more months. So the topic and the focus will be discussing mental health and having conversations around mental health, specifically with the context of celebration of self. So we will have more information on our website very shortly, but registration for this May speaker series set of events will be open in April. So we do have some time, but just want to put that in front of our audience today. And they will be conducted in the same format on Zoom webinar. Lastly, at Keiro, we are committed to enhancing the quality of senior life in our community, like we mentioned at the top of today's presentation. Keiro programs are provided to the community as a resource, but we do rely on the support from our community. So if you found tonight's presentation helpful and engaging, I think we learned a lot from Roxana. We hope you'll consider making a donation to support Keiro and the work that we do. Your support, regardless of size, really matters, and it has a direct impact on what we're able to do as an organization, putting programs like tonight together. And we hope that you are able to support us in any way that you can. Lastly, I do want to mention that we will be sending an evaluation for tonight's program and presentation. So if you have any feedback for us, we do take this to heart. We do try to improve our programs as the year goes on. So if you have feedback on tonight's presentation, we'd be happy to collect that from you. And maybe within the email we'll be sending, we'll have you get in contact with Roxana, provide some information on that. So at this point in time, I just want to say thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Just also want to extend our thanks to Roxana for presenting tonight, sharing a lot of information with us. Happy early birthday to Roxana. And I just want to say thank you all so much and have a good night.